Hello and welcome to Fin24. Minister Malusi Gigaba has now tabled his maiden midterm budget policy statement. With us in studio right now, we have Terry Bell to tell us exactly how Labour feels about this. Terry, how do you think the Labour movement has received Minister Gigaba's inaugural budget?
I don't think anyone, federations, unions, members, was surprised in any way, but they'll continue being utterly appalled that we're continuing to muddle on in exactly the same way as in the past, and with the same group in control, which the unions have already at high level called looters and the corrupt legacy of an administration. So a really corrupt administration. So I can't see that the unions are going to be at all happy.
Terry, what could Minister Gigaba have done differently in the isolated silo of finance?
This is the problem. You cannot do anything in that isolated silo. And this is something the unions have actually realized. I mean, the South African Federation of Trade Unions actually pointed this out in a way that actually made one feel quite sorry for Minister Gigaba, saying there's nothing he can do. Because the unions, what the unions want, and I think what the majority of the population wants, is really radical economic transformation and radical social and political transformation to go along with it. We have more than 10 million people unemployed. We have 17 million on welfare. It's an unsustainable situation.
Absolutely.
And the unions are desperately worried about it. The Labour movement is. They thought, I think, that hope against hope, that Malusi Gigaba might just give an indication that there might be a slight shift towards something positive. There's nothing in what he said. Absolutely nothing.
What do you think the consequences of this particular mini budget is going to be with Labour and just across the board?
I don't think it'll have any specific consequences. It's merely an affirmation that we're continuing on the same crazy path, teetering along a precipice, quite honestly, towards some sort of economic collapse and social and political collapse as well, which comes along with it, and which might lead perhaps to a state of emergency in this country, which would be a disaster as well. It's not just a question of the ratings agencies, a question of our debt repayments, which are now ballooning out of control.
Yeah.
It's an overall thing. We actually need to tackle this thing radically. But in fact, what we have is an administration that has dug us into this hole. Look, there's a global economic crisis. We have got ourselves into a much deeper area of problems than we ever needed to because of this administration, who are supposed to, after all, be our representatives. They're now pouring more money into SOEs, according to Malusi Gigaba today. We should, in fact, be completely revamping those SOEs. It's not a question of selling them off, which is what the DA would want to do. I don't think we should do that either, because it's like they say, selling the family silver, the wrong analogy. What we actually should say is it's like a farm that is owned by the people, was helping the poorest of the poor, etc., but was managed so badly that it's in a complete mess. And one of the dangers might be that the government might decide to, well, let's sell it off. They'll get the money in, short term, then in private hands, these very things which belong to the people will now be sold to the people at profit. That's the problem.
Terry, it sounds very much like all doom and gloom. Do you have any hope at all?
Well, I suppose I would almost say I'd commit suicide if I didn't have any hope. But I know, I faint hope. Faint hope that something will emerge, because I think the majority of people in this country have had enough. What they actually need now, not another political party or some new policy in another silo here or there. They need a radical transformation, perhaps based on the Bill of Rights. Coming forward and saying, look, we're stuck with a constitutional situation which gave the president too much power. We need to revise that. We need to look at our situation from the bottom up and say what is to the benefit of the people as a whole. Whether it can happen, I don't know, but I live in hope.
So Terry, it looks like we're heading for some turbulent times ahead.
I think they're going to be extremely turbulent. It's going to be very messy, but I hope that we don't sort of just have knee-jerk reactions. We're great at that in this country, and I don't think we should do that. And I think the Labour movement in particular has a role to play as the most organised group at the points of production. And they should actually transform themselves in many instances into properly democratic organisations, which they should of course, in Principle B, and they might then give a lead. There are also a number of civil society organizations, religious organizations, that also have this idea, this ideal of a more egalitarian, honest, democratic society. So with a bit of luck, maybe a lot of luck, we'll get there.
And as we head for these turbulent times, we'll definitely keep you up to date at Fin24.